So good night, good evening, everyone. So today is our first Digital 360 talk in English. We have the students of the Bachelor in Business Administration joining us, and we also have a very special guest, very valuable to UNIBE. We have Grizelle De Los Reyes, who is the director of the Communications and Media department in the Florida International University, FYU. She's also part of the strategic communications program in partnership with Miami Ad School. Grizelle has, I think, 23 years of experience. I think that's right. Experience in strategic communications. And she also has a very and beautiful passion for teaching. She is no doubt someone very creative. And as you can see in her website, she is a remarkable teacher. So Grizelle, thank you so much. She's joining us with the topic, how data and research can be turned into amazing creative strategies. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Excellent. I think I have a little delay in the video, but that's okay as long as I'm heard.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation, UNIBE and Mercadexpo 360. It's an honor to be here, and I don't know, can I share my PowerPoint?
Yeah, you can start.
Okay, awesome. Excellent.
The virtual scenario is yours.
Yes, thank God for technology, right? Okay, and let me put it in presentation mode. Let me see if this works. Okay, great.
Remember to turn on your camera, please.
Hold on a second. I don't know how to, I'm sorry. Let me see. I think. Sorry, guys, technical difficulties. I'm using this platform for the first time. I'm used to Zoom. So if you see my screen, you cannot see me.
So,
which is okay. If they don't see me, that's fine. They can see me afterwards. I just don't see. Oh, there we go. Okay. Hopefully, can you see me now?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, as I understand, all of you are, business students. And one of the things that as business students, we have to understand is that you can have the most beautiful marketing plan, but if you don't have the creative and communications component, in order to take a product or a service to market, there's a disconnect with your audience and your business objectives are not going to be met. So first of all, buenas tardes desde Miami. I'm from Puerto Rico. I've been here in the States practically all my working years. And just a little bit about me. Again, I'm a professor here. My name is Grizelle De Los Reyes. If anybody wants to get a hold of me, this is my email at the university. I work for Florida International University, one of the top public schools in the country. And I am, title-wise, I have two titles. I have an academic title and I have an administrative title. My academic title is Associate Teaching Professor, and my administrative title is, as she was saying in the introduction, I'm the program director of a very special master's program that we have in partnership with what used to be called Miami Ad School. Now they're called Mad School of Ideas. And this is technically the best portfolio school in the world. So we're very fortunate to have them as a partner. So what that means is that my job has always been to teach students that are creative. And also, it's almost like I teach on both sides of the equation. I teach more business-like students to think creatively So to step into their right brain. And I teach creative students to think in business terms. So my job has always been to be pooling professionals and students to use and to engage the entire brain, the analytical part and the creative part. So there's a few things that I want to cover today. One of them being, I want to give you basically an overview of an ad agency and give you some perspectives on why, communications is more important than ever. And then we're going to take it from there. I'm going to give you, the creative process from, sitting with your client and understanding what the situation with that client is. And then how do we translate all that into creative work? Obviously, in a sentence is very quick, but when you actually do it and put it in practice, it's quite a process. So I've done the best that I could in making, making it linear, because that's the way that I have to teach it as well. And that's the way that I have executed when I have been in the field. Just a little bit of my background. I started my career before I became an academic in what is considered the top ad agency in the world. It's called J. Walter Thompson. I also worked for Coca-Cola worldwide in the advertising department, which is where, all the advertising for Coca-Cola goes out from this particular department in their headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, and goes to all the different ad agencies that Coca-Cola includes worldwide. It's interesting because, they prepare what is called like a package of elements in that campaign that should be, kind of like the framework. They send commercials and they send the framework, and then each country adapts it to their own circumstance, culture, and idiosyncrasy. So Coca-Cola is an advertiser that respects culture, but they still have, to maintain a global presence in the world. From there, I went into media, and I have worked in radio, I've worked in television. I worked here in Univision, actually launching one program that you may know, the morning show Despierta America. We were, my team was the team that basically launched that program. And I actually manage what is called product integration, which means when you're looking at television, you basically see the program, right? And then you go into the commercial break, and then you go back into the program. But in that commercial break, and particularly now with skipping commercials and all that, you may lose the advertiser, because that's when people may skip commercials or they, get up and go elsewhere. But I specialize in an area called, now it has different names. It can be branded entertainment. It can be product integration. So I specialize in that, which is interesting because you have one foot in production and you have the other foot in sales. So you have to present it to the client, then go back. If the client, is interested, then you go back and produce the program and you integrate that sponsor into the content. Now what happens is that you cannot escape, the sponsor in front of you. So every time you guys see, let's say a Coca-Cola, just to keep it with the same product. But if you see a Coca-Cola can in a scene of a program, a movie, a video, that is not by chance. That's more than likely an advertiser coming in, and wanting the branded entertainment or product integration. And that's probably when you're seeing reality TV particularly, and you see that some of the logos or t-shirts are blurred. What that means is that particular sponsor that may be on that t-shirt of that character, they didn't pay for, to be on television. So Again, that's how media makes their money, is by selling advertising. There's other models, but that's one of them. So moving on, let me give you, and by the way, this topic is about how does marketing research and data informs creative work. Mind you, these are topics that I teach over the course of a semester, and projects that I do, because I'm still a marketing researcher, that I do over the course of months. So I'm giving you, basically the tip of the iceberg on each of the topics that I'm going to be presenting to you. So I wanted to go, and by the way, those of you that are, graphic designers, I always tell my students, because believe me, I teach creatives, I say, excuse my slides, they're very basic. I use them more as props to have the information in front of me and the students. So I wanted to go, as basic and then build from there. And there's a reason why I'm showing you this information. But when a client hires an ad agency or a communication strategy agency, these are the basic departments that you have in an agency, because all of them have to work somewhat together in order to handle the business of that client. So you have account services, you have the strategy, account or strategic planning that you see in one of the squares here. Then you have the media group, which is, once the campaign is put together, this is the team that basically takes that advertising and buys the space, buys the airtime. They evaluate all the different platforms in order to get that message to the right audience. Because one thing that I also preach is that all of us, we are in the waste management business. And what do I mean by that? That now more than ever, clients are, minding their budgets, and by the way, I started my career probably at your age, somewhere in the 80s and 90s. And this was an era of tremendous growth. And it was also an era of very deep pockets. I would say the 80s, the 90s, and somewhere into the early 2000s, because technically that's when you saw digital grow as a medium. That's where you saw all those mobile platforms also, like smartphones, internet enabled, and all these devices. So the world changed, and the way that we communicate with customers and our target audiences completely have changed. What hasn't changed is the way that the message that hasn't changed. Having a very creative message that is going to cut through the clutter, and this is key, because now with the proliferation of platforms, and now not only do you have, as you know, you have television. And I venture to say that the majority of you, because of the age category that you're in, you do not watch what is called linear television. That means sitting in front of the TV set with a remote control and changing channels. So that's more for, older audiences but again, you cannot disregard, traditional platforms. This is something that I also preach, because you cannot assume that everyone is like you, if you don't consume that medium, it doesn't mean that a target audience that you may be, working to communicate or to sell a product, they don't use that medium. So we have to, as marketers, we have to have a blank canvas in our minds every time we take on a project for a client. So going back to the ad agency, so you have the media department. That's where I started. Then you have the creative department. The creative department is the one that brings the vision to life, that brings the strategy to life. The strategists or the account planners and the creatives, they work hand in hand, because the strategists are the one that look at the data, that design primary research. They're looking at culture. They're looking at different, elements. They're studios of culture, and they're studios of pop culture. And not only that, the planners are the strategies are the ones that oversee the research, and they're able to read data. So from all that, whether it's numbers or qualitative information, they have to extract what is called the insight. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, but they extrapolate the data. And then from that data, you have to find the story that is going to connect the audience to the product. And hopefully increase sales, which is ultimately the goal for any company, whether it's a product or a service. So creatives are extremely important. And then you have production, and you have, your administrative, departments, just like any other company. So this is a basic structure of the agency, but who brings that creative vision through advertising to life is a combination of the strategic planners and the creative team. They work very, very close together. So, agencies get paid different ways. They get paid commissions, meaning media commissions. So every time you put a campaign on the air, and you're spending X amount of money, agencies, and again, that's a negotiation between the client and the agency, they get paid somewhat of a percentage of the budget they're placing, because again, they do a lot of work for that, for that function that they have to do. They get paid a fee if there's, kind of like a project. They get paid a retainer, just like a lawyer. If they're going to work long time with a client, they agree on a retainer, which means that, for these services, this is what, what we're going to pay you on a monthly basis. Now, the most interesting thing in trend in the industry is the last bullet. It's called performance or incentives. And what that means is that between the client and the agency, you agree on certain KPIs. I'm sure you've heard the term key performance indicators. So they agree on certain metrics by which to measure the effectiveness of that campaign. Obviously, the ultimate KPI is sales, but in order for that client to commit payment to an agency based on performance, they have to agree on very specific metrics or KPIs. So if the industry is going more in that direction, believe me, you can have a beautiful plan, but if that campaign is not resonating with your target audience, it's not going to move the needle for the client. That's ultimately what we're after. So this slide here is the way that I teach the creative process. How do we go from understanding a client to actually pulling together a campaign and launching it into the marketplace? So I'm going to speak briefly on this slide, and then we're going to continue. Actually, I want to save some time so that if you or any of you have a question, I would love to take your question. So there are 3 briefs that I use, and in the business world you use. And again, this is a campaign from beginning to end that has primary research. Some campaigns are done, a little bit faster. So some of these steps, it's not that they're, we're cutting corners, but it's a faster pace. And some campaigns may not have the luxury or the budget to do primary research. By the way, just in case you don't know, there's a difference between primary and secondary research. Secondary research is what you have available. Let's say you go to Google to, look for articles or look for trends. All of that is secondary research. Primary research is the one that you design and you do and you perform and you collect data, whether it's quantitative or qualitative. You're collecting data based on something very specific that you're trying to understand. And then from there, you extrapolate the revelation or the insight from all that data. You can craft strategy and you can launch a campaign based on, your insight that is laid out in the creative strategy, document. So, we start with what is called the client brief. What is the client brief? Well, the client brief is when a client sits down with hopefully any of you, right? Or maybe you're the client. And so let's say that you guys are the clients and you are going to hire your ad agency or engage your ad agency into launching a new product or a new brand. So the first thing that you do, there's a briefing process. And there's a briefing process where, again, you as the client sit down with a vendor or an agency, and there's a briefing, there's a communication from the client that this is where we're at. This is the situation analysis. I'm going to show you a few slides down some of the things that you have to consider because, again, part of being a great business professional is knowing how to ask the right questions. So there's this first encounter where the client briefs their agency and they communicate to the agency, first and foremost, this is what we want to do. We want to sell X% more than the previous year, or we want to increase awareness, which is not necessarily, it's more of a communication objective more than a business objective. There's different types of objectives. But the bottom line is that the client is giving that vendor, that agency, an overview of where they're at, and what they want to do, where they're at and what they want to do. And, and that's their business objective. Now, when you take a business objective, you also have to consider, as a communication, professional, okay, why are they not there already? So what are the barriers to entry? And I'm going to give you some examples, but now you're discovering the real issue. So the objective and the barriers to entry or the issues are completely different. Those barriers to entry or issues is what's keeping the client on being where they want to be, right? So that's the second layer to that conversation. And again, you have to know the questions that you want to ask. So for every meeting that you have, say if you're the client with the vendor or the vendor, or you're the vendor talking to the client, do your homework. Know what questions to ask. Come very prepared. Actually, do that a practice in your life. That every time that you're gonna, talk to somebody or whatever, come prepared. Come together. Pay attention. Listen more than you speak. Sometimes that's difficult, but. So anyway, you do your homework, in the conversation, you discover the real issue, and then you start asking questions. Who's your target? Who's your consumer? Tell me about them. So they technically tell you all about the consumer. Again, this is a client, agency, or vendor discussion. And once you have all those pieces, all those, pieces of information, then you can sit and start crafting your research, your primary research, which is the second brief that you see here on the extreme left. So first you have the client brief where you lay out everything about the client. There's different formats. I like using one format called the 4Cs, where I look at the client, the consumer, the competition, and culture, which is very important because in order to craft communication strategy, you need to know what's happening in the marketplace. So that's the 4C, culture. So once you have all those 4 pieces together, then you can start designing your primary research. And by the way, I am a marketing researcher as well. So even though I have this career as an academic and a university administrator, I also love, that's probably one of the funnest thing that I do, is do marketing research type projects. Particularly, I like the qualitative, where I talk to people and see what's in their mind. But so you design a research, and designing research again has other layers. A lot of layers to understand. So I'm staying very top line. So once you design your primary research and you identify what is it that you need to understand, and that comes in the way of what is called a research objective, right? That you clarify the areas of research that you need to kind of develop a questionnaire for. So now once you have those areas of research clarified, then and only then can you start developing the questions that respond to that areas of research or research objectives. So there's 2 methodologies. There's the qualitative, which is talking to people, open-ended questions, and getting deep into a topic. And then you have your quantitative research that is more, close-ended questions, meaning that they ask the question, you see all the answer options, and you put it in survey format, and then so every time, for example, there's politics and you see there's a poll that puts the candidate above this candidate, that poll, that's quantitative research. So we design the research, we run our research project. We start collecting data. We start recruiting participants for qualitative. We send that survey, to people that hopefully they'll pass the screening criteria because they qualify, because they're an ideal participant for that research. And once you have the data already collected, you start analyzing the data. And seeing what you found. Actually, I taught a class today about that because I was telling them they're working with online dating, a company called Match.com. So we're working with them directly, and I was telling them that, technically you run the campaign. You run the research. You start analyzing the data. And I was explaining to them, as a marketing research analyst that I am, what do you look for, when you're analyzing data? So when you're analyzing data, there's certain things that you're going to look for. The 2 most obvious ones are commonalities, right? What are people answering to the questions that respond to an area of research or a research objective? What are they, answering commonly? So you see participant after participant saying maybe different ways, but the same thing. So those commonalities. But something else that is interesting to me is what is called an outlier, what I call an outlier. An outlier means that in statistics, it means something that does not conform to a trend. So maybe in statistics, that's not a necessarily good thing because it can throw off your analysis. But I think in research, when you're conducting qualitative and quantitative research in order to understand a marketplace, to launch a product or a service, those outliers or one-offs or things that are not conforming to the trend are as important also, because some people may surprise you and give you, things that are futuristic, things that are lacking in the marketplace. So those are outliers to me are also very important to take into consideration. Suffice to say is that once you do all that analysis, then you can discover or you look for what is it that I'm going to anchor this message in. You already understand the audience. That's what you recruited for your primary research. And now with that read, what is it that I'm finding? And from all those findings, you can, look for the revelation. And that's what an insight is. That's what anchors a creative campaign together. And I'm going to give you some examples. So the last brief is the creative brief. And the creative brief is where the strategy, the creative strategy is laid out. And that's another brief. And by the way, briefs exist so that there's an understanding from all the parties, right? It's a document that, the vendor or the agency, the creative team, the strategic team, along with the client, you pour everything that you understand, everything that you find out, and then everything that you want to create. You put it in this document called a brief. And then from there, when there's consensus in that team, then you can move on and create the work. So that's the last piece here, the creative brief, and then the tactical execution. So very simplistically, when you are looking at this workflow and evaluation, you have to understand a brand, and I'm going to tell you how to understand a brand very briefly. You have to understand your consumer. Then you go into primary research. Then you collect the data, you read the data, and then, you discover the insight. You go into the creative strategy or the big idea, and then it's the executions, which is technically what you see, the commercial that you see, the billboard that you see. That's a result of all these processes. That's technically at the end of this line. Then, at the end of when you launch the campaign, there's other actions that come into play, like, measuring effectiveness. Did it move the needle to the business objective that the client put on the table? And if they move the needle and that vendor is going to be paid on performance, are they hitting the mark? So there's a lot of things that happen after you launch the campaign. So technically, to understand a brand, you have to peel the layers and understand first what is a brand. A brand is a promise, and it's a promise that you keep. Obviously, if I tell you, think of Starbucks, I am sure that an image comes to mind of walking into this place that is very, worldly, inviting, warm. You smell the coffee. They even invented their own language. They're called baristas, right? And then all these sizes, tall, grande, venti. So, but the point is that image that comes to your mind is a brand promise that is consistently delivered, no matter what Starbucks you go into the world. Obviously, that's another topic. They have a culture that is kept. Starbucks tend to have the same layout, so that's a promise that is consistently delivered. And by the way, Starbucks, the hook is the coffee, but it's not all about the coffee, right? It's more the environment, the ambiance. That's where you meet people. People, make Starbucks their virtual offices, etc. Then you go into the layer of understanding the brand and what makes that brand a product, from the logo, the character, the brand features, what do they offer, etc., etc. Then comes the equity. The equity means what position do you have in the marketplace? You know, are you a leading brand? Are you an underdog? You know, in the marketplace for the category, what slice of the pie do you have? Does your brand have? So that's the equity. And again, equity, you can only tell equity from conducting research to understand, you know, market share. And then the last one is what we all do, what you guys are going to do for a product, a company, which is the brand management. This encompasses all the marketing. It encompasses distribution, taking that brand to market, like, you know, points of sale, et cetera, et cetera. So the strength of the brand, the way you evaluate a brand is it a good product keeping a promise? What exactly are they offering? How are they perceived in the marketplace, and how are we marketing that brand? So this is the you know, the strength of a brand. And then remember when I showed you that slide that at the beginning there's a whole level of understanding, a situational in a brand analysis. These are some of the things, and by the way, I can make this presentation available to all of you, but these are the things that you need to, you know, come with maybe some level of understanding. This is kind of like a roadmap to ask questions, you know, so understand their history, you know, understand what exactly is happening, you know, with that company. What is their business structure? How do they make money? That's very important, you know. You know, what are the challenges? What are the barriers to entry? What you know, what are the goals that we're trying to accomplish? What are the barriers to entry again? Then understanding the consumer. Who are we talking to? What is their current audience? Maybe here we can identify an opportunity, an opportunistic target that the client is not targeting. So here you have to define the target demographically, geographically, what is their lifestyle, what is their mindset. In other words, just psychographically understand the client and the opportunity there. And then, you know, what has worked, what has not worked, what are the ideal outcomes, you know, quantifiable. And one of the things that I also tell particularly creatives is that they tend to focus more on the forms and the formats, which, what, by the way, that's what phygital means, right? Phygital is what you see in the marketplace. What I'm doing is taking you behind the scenes before you go create. And creating, whether it's traditional, physical, or digital, that's the end product of a long process. I'm taking you through the long process, the back end. So here is what I was saying, that when I talk to creatives, I tell creatives, you know, it doesn't matter how beautiful your campaign is. It needs to be at some point measured. Everything is measured, because that beautiful campaign falls within a puzzle of a business plan. That's part of it. That's called advertising. It's called promotions. That's the ticket to get your brand to the market. And then, you know, metrics, and then obviously key areas of research. What is it that we understand? What information do we have? And what is it that we need to understand from the marketplace? Now, giving you a few examples, you know, we have, for example, this case study, you know, of Quaker Oats. Quaker Oats, in this particular, you know, point in time, their oatmeal, they were the biggest market share by far in this category of hot cereals. But what was interesting was that even though they had a very high market penetration, they had very low use. And what this means is that, yeah, you know, and I don't know if this happens to you, but if I go to the supermarket and I buy oatmeal, thinking that in some morning I'm going to, prepare myself a nice bowl of oatmeal. I may do that at the store level, but when I go home, maybe, that made me feel good in the moment. It made me feel even healthier, but I don't necessarily use it. So how do you entice a customer not only to buy the product, but also to use it? And in this particular case, several things happen, obviously, but and this is an old case study, but I like it because it's so real. One of the things that happened was that, and this is not an easy feat, but in their own research and development, they found out that oatmeal reduces the bad cholesterol. So the little heart that you see here was their efforts paid off in getting the American Heart Association to endorse the product. So every time you see a heart on a product, that's a hard-earned heart because it requires endorsement from, one of the authorities, that nonprofit authorities in the industry. So the heart was very important. So now people, it's like, use the oatmeal because this is part of a wellness plan. The other things that brands typically do, and you probably have seen this tactic at the supermarket level, is, encouraging multiple use by giving you recipes, and you can make oatmeal cookies and so forth. So this is yet another tactic to get product usage amped up. So high penetration, low use. These were some of the things that this particular product, and by the way, this is the real issue. The business objective here, they want to say more oatmeal. The barriers to entry was what I just explained. And these examples are really interesting. Guinness beer. I don't know if any of you drink Guinness beer, but Guinness beer is a beer that is very heavy. And it's, it's an acquired taste. But what's interesting is that this beer has a process to pour and consume. So you have to pour it at a certain angle and you have to let it sit before you consume it. So it's a process, and it's a process that requires waiting. So what happened here is that hassle, and again, that's, going to market, understanding that this is the insight, this is the revelation. People perceive this product to be a hassle. When another beer that is lighter, you can chug it and quench your thirst. This beer has a different process. So that insight into what is perceived to be something negative can be turned around into, there's a reward at the end of that waiting process. And that was the strategic idea, believe it or not. It's like, okay, the marketplace, the current perception is that this beer is heavy, there's a wait. You cannot consume it right away. It's a process. But how you turn around something that may seem, negative is, no, there's a reward in waiting. And the whole campaign, that was a strategic idea. The executional idea, which is the campaign, is good things come for those who wait. The other example that I have here, the Omo, Dirt is Good, is for Unilever, one of Unilever's detergent brands. And around the world, they have different names. But the process is that for women, or for, dads, mom and dads, or men and women that do laundry, they do not differentiate the differences in detergent. And it really happened to me when my sons were younger, and every weekend I was, doing laundry. You see the pile of laundry and it's dirty and it's smelly and if the pile of laundry is not going to change, that's the perception of the marketplace. Let's celebrate dirt, because what does dirt mean? Dirt when you're talking about your kids' dirty clothes, it means that they're out there, they're socializing, they're playing. That's the way they explore the world. So something, again, that can be perceived as something negative, that was the insight, can be turned around into a glorious insight, anchoring a campaign. And this whole campaign, and now they've taken it to the next level, which is, now that the kids are out and they're appreciating the earth, is how do we conserve it? Because that's the trend, right? So the Dirt is Good campaign has continued not only to be, communicated in the countries where these detergents are marketed, but are also the platform, the springboard to a bigger topic and making kids conscientious that the planet needs to be saved by doing certain things. The other one that is, a U.S. Centric campaign is the Real Milk campaign. You may have seen it in the way of Gut Milk. That has become very iconic. But that was, and it's milk across the board in the United States. But it actually started with the California Milk Advisory Board, that they saw in that moment in time what was the issue, that milk consumption was at an all-time low. So how do you get people back to, drinking milk? And the issue here was that people don't think about milk. When you think about milk, when you have the idea, you wake up, you're hungry, you go to the kitchen, you want to pour yourself a bowl of cereal, and lo and behold, you open the door and there's no milk. So it's an afterthought. And the other thing that was particularly interesting, at least here in the US, is that milk, you don't buy it necessarily by the brand. You buy it by if it's 2% or it's low fat or it's fat free or it's whole milk. That's the way we buy milk. We don't necessarily buy a brand. So the whole concept of this campaign was anchored in, bring milk to the forefront, because you only think about it when it's not there. So that's the whole premise of that Gut Milk campaign. So moving on, getting to the right strategy, you have to peel the layers. What do we need to research? And, one of the, I love this phrase, that a problem well stated is a problem half solved. And that's so true. But again, you need to understand what is it that you need to research further in order to step into a very informed research process in order to go to the marketplace to find out what you need. And what we're after is these insights. Insights to us in the creative fields, that's our Holy Grail. That's what we, and again, there's data. And data, again, even in numbers, you can find a story. Let me give you an idea. And this person was one of my speakers in one of my classes last week. And it's the co-creator of the MasterCard Priceless campaign. And hopefully you're familiar with all these campaigns, but the MasterCard Priceless campaign, at that point, when, the agency was McCann Erickson was pitching the campaign, they saw that they were competing against Visa. And, the chief marketing officer for MasterCard told their agency, McCann, they go, if we do not do something within the next 18 months, we're going to be out of business. And the predicament here, if you really think about it, is a little plastic square that allows you to, buy things. Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola and soft drinks, they're carbonated caramel water, So it's like, how do you create this whole branding around something that is perceived so basic, so simple, right? and you think about Coca-Cola and you don't think about the liquid inside, you think about the brand, you think about the color, you think about the can or the bottle in its shape. That's what's so fascinating. The territory that brands occupy in our brain, in how we, market them, how we understand them, our as consumers, our relationship with them. Bottom line is that in data, they found out, and they did a whole bunch of, techniques that I would love to, share with all of you because they're fascinating. For that, there's things money can buy, but for everything else, there's MasterCard, right? When they came to that priceless campaign, which is so iconic. But one of the things that they found out through research, and again, the technique in discovering this was that they showed images to research participants, and they said, okay, pick the image that depicts American Express, pick the image that depicts Visa, and pick the image that depicts the MasterCard consumer. And what they saw was that the Visa customer was perceived as a jet setter, not a jet setter, but like socialites. The image was people skiing, of a certain age, skiing, socializing in the slopes, so kind of affluent if you're going to go ski. The American Express image picked by research participants was somebody with a briefcase stepping onto a plane. That's how the perception of the American Express customer. Guess what? The MasterCard, which kind of sank the morale of the agency. What the MasterCard perception was a house, very boring little house. But actually, that was a good thing because that's attainable. That's your everyday life, your everyday consumer. And they even labeled their consumer the good revolver. Why revolver? Because that revolving credit that you see in credit cards. Technically, what that means is that, and the way they tied that whole creative strategy together was saying, these people are hardworking people, and they use their credit cards to basically afford things that maybe they don't have the money for, but they use the credit cards to tie their lives together. Sometimes, and probably your parents, you don't know how you do it, but you do it. There's always food on the table. There's always, gifts under the Christmas tree. And guess what? Some of these, hardworking people, the way that they make it happen is by, charging credit cards and then paying over time. They don't pay all at once, they pay over time. So the way that they tied the data, because it's like 87% of people use credit cards to afford the good things. That was the data. But the way they extracted the data, and again, doing all these research, was, okay, so these are everyday people buying good things in order to give their family the best that they can afford. So these are the stories in data that basically bring out, these insights or the Holy Grail. And one thing that I want to show you is that where can these insights, these revelations come from? Besides from research, which is probably your first, square here, consumer insight. By the way, all the words that you see here is because I put links to the campaign so that you can see examples. So first thing is get, data from your consumer. This can be done through primary research, but there's other buckets that you can observe and extract an insight or a revelation from which to anchor your campaign. And by the way, I'm challenging you that when you see a commercial now, just because you're business students doesn't mean that, you're not creative yourselves. that you cannot work with creatives in order to, surface these wonderful insights that can be the anchor of a campaign that completely resonates with your audience. The second bucket is your culture. What's happening in culture that you can extrapolate into a campaign or from the future? What's the next iteration of an iPhone that you can put in a commercial, or from the product itself? Like the good thing comes from those who wait. That's an insight that comes from the product itself that you can extrapolate and make the basis of a creative campaign. From the brand, from the market, from purchasing. I'm sure that if you know the brand IKEA, and that's the commercial that I have here. Why purchase? Because the insight for this particular commercial I have here is that IKEA is a retailer where you can, they're sleek products, but they're affordable. So you can afford to, purchase the new trends because they're affordable, but yet they look good and they look, they don't look cheap. Again, from how you use the product or how the owner perceives their own brand. So things to consider, when you're looking to pull together research is, for example, what the client has shared with you. The understanding the barriers to entry, is that product entry? Do you want trial? Do you want retention of the brand? The consumer journey, that's another thing that, is very important. How does that consumer go from awareness of the product to purchase? How do you take them through that, entire journey? Then what the product has to offer and the needs that they're fulfilling in the marketplace. That's another analysis that we do. In that journey, what are the points of pain, and what are the points of delights? But for that, you have to make that journey a tool that is usable for you to understand against the points of entry and the barriers to trial. What is the product lacking? What does the consumer, the marketplace wants that the product is not offering? Maybe your competition is offering. All these areas that may be important to the client, and to you if you're the agency, these are things that you have to really look close in order to be able to design research and conduct research and, extrapolate data. By the way, this is me conducting a research project, what is called focus groups, and talking a little bit about the journey. By the way, the journey, that's another series of topics, but the journey means how do you take a consumer from awareness to consideration, to purchase, to retention, and ultimately to advocacy, which are your influencers. How do you take them through this funnel? And what you have to consider here is what are the touch points? Where does the consumer and the customer start, where does the brand and the consumer, interject? So the last thing that I'm going to share with you, again, in this strategic creative strategy process, which means going from understanding the client from a business standpoint to actually creating a campaign, phygital, or any other traditional, digital, physical, how do you create that campaign? And the composition of, creative strategy, once you understand, now you have conducted all your research. You have understood everything you need to understand. You have analyzed the data, whether it's quantitative or qualitative. Now you pull everything together for the creatives to go out and create the campaign. So what goes here? First of all, the communications objectives. You need to communicate to your creatives. What is it that we're trying to achieve? What's the purpose of the message? What needs to be achieved? Why is this brief here? Then your creative directives, meaning anything that is important to the brand to maintain that branding element. Who's the target? Who's the audience? Who is this going to? They need to understand that. Who's your competition? Again, every time you hear the word positioning, that means how does your brand stand in relationship to your competition? And then what is the product offering? You know, what are the features? How does the consumer benefit from those features? What are the wants and the needs that you're fulfilling with that brand in the marketplace? And the last piece is, what's the media? What is it? Digital? What exactly are we going to use to communicate that message through which platforms to the target audience? So I hope that, this, talk allowed you to understand a little bit better, the creative process from understanding the client and going through all the 3 briefs that I showed you, conducting primary and secondary research, then pulling, a message, a strategy, a creative strategy for your creative team. And how does that creative team basically bring that vision to life and again, then it becomes a matter of message and which platforms are you using? How do you take that to the marketplace? So I'm going to stop sharing. And if there are any questions, I would love to entertain questions. I am not sure if there's questions from anybody.
Yes, we have a few questions.
And I know we went a little bit over time.
Yes, just 1 second, please.
Of course. So I hope this helped all of you, to understand the process. Again, one of my favorite things to do, besides teaching and managing the program, I like everything that I do, and I've really have appreciated my career. I think I've made some really good career moves. But it's marketing research.
Yes. So first of all, we have a few comments. So Daniela said that this was a great presentation. Margaret said that the points you made were very interesting, and so did Christopher. Amanda says, wow. And we have a lot of clapping emojis from the students. So personally, I was taking notes, and so I really love when you were talking about the OMO campaign, and I love the insight they took, of what is dirt and, let's get dirty. And, with that goes through our first question. And it's like, do you have any tips for the students and, people working on agencies and businesses about finding that Holy Grail as you know?
Yeah, that is the 64,000 penny question, because actually when I was lecturing my students this morning, their master level creative students, I was telling them, you wouldn't have been studying for so long and now investing in a master's degree if this was an easy task. Because like I showed you, there's so many elements, so many moving parts to understanding. But I guess if you want to do something very simplistic, but actually something that it's, I wish more brands would do this, is a very simple man on the street, as we call it in research, type of, quick survey, even showing, what is called A/B testing, when you're showing concepts. What do you think of this? What does this tell you? Doing that is invaluable. The other thing is that, even though, most of research can be expensive, but you have tools. I don't know if the students know about this place in Google called Think with Google. I was showing my students this morning. Go to Google and go to Think with Google. And Think with Google is basically a very, in Google is sitting, as you know, on billion of pieces of data. So they filter interesting things, but there's also tools that you can play with, to basically get, for example, give you an example, and this is probably where you should start. Go to the Google search bar and type whatever, right? Whatever you're looking for. See all the suggestions that come underneath, because that's what people are searching for as it relates to that. That's what that all those suggestions are. That's called a digital blueprint. What is the digital blueprint? Start there, and again, doing research can be a kind of, a process, but you can conduct marketing research on a dime or for free if you know exactly who your participant is and go look for them in the marketplace.
So, since the people organizing Mercadexpo are in our last semester, actually, that's something that we have done a lot. And personally, something that I found that really helped me on my project, and I want to know what you think of this, is finding someone I know that could actually be my potential client. For example, the brand I'm working with, somebody that would really be my potential client is my mom. And I usually sit down and think, how would my mom, do this? Or what would she think of this action, for example? What do you think about that? Finding someone and trying to see their behaviors as part of, research.
No, that is, first of all, it takes understanding what you're looking for. For example, I'm doing several real world campaigns, projects with my students, from online dating to medicinal marijuana. So what and again, when I do these type of projects with students, I tell them, I'm not your professor here. I am your project manager. I know as little about that category as you know. We're all in the same boat. I just have a megaphone, you have an oar, and I'm telling you to row. So I get in the boat with them to try to, again, peel the layers back and understand the client. The most important thing, I think, after you understand everything you need to understand about that client, is understand everything you need to know about that consumer, because that's what you're going to go find.
Very sad. But anyway, thank you to everyone that's been watching. This has been an amazing... Oh, she's back.
Did I went away, right?
Yes, you did.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Yeah, the internet kind of booted
This is live.
me out.
That's the...
Yeah, no, what I was saying, because I kept talking, not knowing if I was on or I wasn't on. And I don't know if we're off the air. Are we off the air? Because I see the gracias back. Okay, we're back.
Yes, we're back. Okay.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. It's the internet sometimes, this is the magic of technology,
it's
but
part
also
of being in the virtual era.
Sorry. But anyway, going back to your example, by all means, this is what I was saying, that there's nothing like working with a real client, but also there's nothing like working with real people and finding what's in their mind. What do they think? And what I was saying is that's the most fun part of everything I do. And I love teaching. I love managing the program. But I think that the most interesting thing to me that I do is research. And particularly between quantitative, which is numbers. You see number, you try to find the story. But getting into people's heads, understanding what makes them tick, understanding their preferences, there's nothing that replaces that interaction. And by all means, I think that, that's probably one of the best things you can do.
100%. And, even me as a Gen Zer, I really think that even with all this spirituality and, which is great because thanks to the technology, we're able to connect with people like you that are miles away. And I feel like this is an amazing opportunity. But at the same time, that emotional and physical connection that comes with meeting someone in person and having in-person, actions and events, there's nothing like that. Honestly.
Nothing. And that's what I think. And I'm sure all of you guys being on the receiving end of education, you are feeling, there's a convenience of being able to, go to school in your, underwear, for lack of in your shorts. It's this little square, all we have, to look at. But there's nothing. And by the way, guys, you will never be replaced by a computer or a robot. There's nothing that replaces human creativity. Will never be replaced for that matter,
So just as a reminder for the students watching us, like if you guys have any comments and any other questions, just please leave them on the chat box because I have someone messaging me with a question and it says, what's your advice for getting data for the first time for a brand?
Well, it depends because that's another really loaded question, particularly when you're trying to look for free data, free data. But when you go work for a company, and I wish that all of you guys are hired well and they're hired by companies that have resources for what is called syndicated data, meaning data that you buy in order to afford you to do your work, like MRI Simmons or Nielsen data, that sort of data. When we're at this level, we rely on what we find for free. I tell you, try playing think with Google. You're going to find some resources there. Again, try to understand the category. If you cannot get so granular as to understand everything that you need to understand with data in order to pull together a marketing plan or what have you, and you're relying on whatever you find, you can get your hands on, things like articles and category data, whatever you can find on your company. Again, that's what you need to understand from the client business point. But the consumer, understand, culture, what's happening in culture, what's happening with that particular consumer in relationship to that category. But again, doing this type of man on the street research conscientiously and with the design that I, shared with you in mind, what exactly do you need to understand, research area? And only then can you start generating the questions. Qualitative, open-ended, quantitative, close-ended with options. And then, you guys have platforms like SurveyMonkey. If you're in the university, you have Qualtrics. I would imagine that you have access to, platforms like that to fill survey. But again, and this is what I tell students, if you don't do the design of the research correctly, then you're going to get garbage data, and it's garbage in, garbage out. So it starts with trying to understand conscientiously areas of research. And once you have, let's say, 5 good areas of research, you can generate the questions in its proper format. So, if you want to generate data, you may not, have mountains of data, but at least you have something to base what you're recommending on.
That was actually beautiful. I loved it. And yeah, so sadly, we're running out of time, but thank you so much, Grizelle, and to everybody watching this, thank you for joining us today. Just a reminder that we still have 1 week and a half of 360 talks in case you want to join us in any other talks. And, hopefully maybe any of the students or the students here at Mercadexpo could join you there at FYU on Miami and Florida. And also, it will be amazing if any of you guys would join us at Mercadexpo, December 1, 2, and 3. So, yeah. So, thank you again. And this is the end of our talk today.
Awesome. I wish you guys to be employed well once you graduate and go out there and be badass, as I say. Be good.
Amen.
Good. Level
Thank you.
of excellence, okay?
Bye, Grizelle.
Bye.
Bye.